An exciting story of redemption, love, passion, and new beginnings. A cleaning woman obsessed with her boss, a devastated millionaire, and one night where she forced him to lie by her side and he, in shock, froze in bed. Watch this story until the end. You'll be surprised by this story. If you like love stories, romance, subscribe to this channel. Leave your comment. Every day we post videos like this one. Continuing. The service elevator climbed silently through the 40 floors of Skyview Tower, cutting through the New York night like a blade through black velvet. Aria Johnson gripped the broom handle with unnecessary force, her knuckles whitening against her brown skin. 3 in the morning, the hour when the rich slept heavily and she could exist without being seen. 28 years old, but her hands seemed to have lived twice as long. Calluses from knowing the rough texture of steel wool, from knowing exactly how many drops of disinfectant were needed to make Italian marble shine like a mirror. She was good at what she did, invisible, but good. The elevator door opened on the ground floor with a metallic whisper. The lobby stretched before her like a modern cathedral, all in shades of white and gold, with chandeliers that cost more than she would earn in 5 years. Aria walked through the familiar corridors, her steps muffled by the Persian carpet covering the floor. She knew every inch of this place, every stain that mysteriously appeared on the marble, every fingerprint that formed on the mirrors, every leaf that fell from imported flower arrangements. But it was in the mirrors that her soul hurt the most. Dozens of them strategically positioned to amplify the sense of grandeur of the environment. And in all of them, Aria saw only empty reflections, as if she were transparent, as if her presence there was so temporary that light itself didn't bother to reflect her image back. She began cleaning at the reception. Mechanical movements, almost meditative. Spray, scrub, dry. Spray, scrub, dry. As she worked, her mind wandered upward, high above, to the 40th floor. The penthouse. The apartment that never needed cleaning because its resident seemed not to truly live. Derek Cavendish. She knew the name because she had heard the whispers among the doormen. The young heir to Cavendish Laboratories, one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the country. 32 years old, widowed for a year, a recluse since then. The building staff called him the ghost of the top floor because he was rarely seen. Just heard. Aria finished the reception and moved on to the first-floor corridors. Here lived multinational executives, construction company owners, heirs to old fortunes. People who were born with life, solved and died, without ever having to worry about the price of a pound of flour. She cleaned their mirrors, their gold doorknobs, their imported marble floors, and wondered what it would be like to wake up every morning without the weight of the world on her shoulders. But it was Derek she thought about most, perhaps because he was the only resident she had never seen in person. Only the traces of his presence, a half-empty glass left on the kitchen counter, clothes piled on the bedroom chair, always the same clothes, dark dress pants, impeccable, white shirts, as if he were a man trapped in a day that repeated infinitely. She went up to the second floor. Here the apartments were even larger, the mirrors even more elaborate. Aria worked in silence, lost in her thoughts. There was something about Derek's absence that intrigued her more than anyone else's presence. It was as if he were a question, without an answer, a puzzle with missing pieces. She had started to notice the details of his routine about 3 months ago. At first, it was just professional curiosity. The penthouse was her last cleaning point of the night, and she noticed that certain things never moved. The bed was never unmade. The pillows remained impeccably arranged, as if he slept standing up, as if sleep were a luxury he couldn't afford. 3rd floor, 4th floor, 5th. Aria climbed through the floors like climbing steps toward heaven. And with each floor her mind built more details about the man on the 40th floor. She imagined what his voice would be like. Deep, probably. With the neutral accent of someone who studied at expensive schools and foreign universities. She imagined his hands, long, well cared for, but with the tension of someone who carries heavy responsibilities. It was on the 10th floor that she found the first real clue about Derek Cavendish. A business magazine forgotten on the center table of the social hall. On the cover, a photo of him. Aria stopped working and approached, her heart accelerating for no apparent reason. He was younger than she had imagined, and more handsome. Dark, hair combed back, green eyes that seemed to hold secrets, a restrained smile that didn't reach his eyes. He wore an impeccable black suit and held a champagne glass. The caption read, "Derek Cavendish takes over presidency of Cavendish Laboratories after family tragedy." Arya read the entire article, right there, standing in the hallway. She discovered that he had lost his wife in a car accident a year before, that since then he had become a recluse, appearing only at essential board meetings, that the company employees were concerned about his mental state, that he had changed completely after the death of Helen Cavendish. Helen, the dead wife, had a name and a face, because there was a photo of the couple in the article. A blonde, delicate woman with a sweet smile and kind eyes. The type of woman who seemed born to be happy, the opposite of Arya in every way. She put the magazine back in the exact place where she had found it and continued cleaning. But now her mind was in turmoil. Derek wasn't just a rich recluse. He was a man shattered by grief, a widower too young, someone who had lost the ability to live after losing the one he loved. 15th floor, 20th, 25th. With each floor she climbed, Arya felt as if she were approaching something important. She wasn't quite sure what, but there was a different energy in the air, like before a storm. It was on the 30th floor that she saw the first anomaly in the building's routine. One of the penthouse windows was lit. Normally, Derek's apartment remained dark throughout the night. Arya stopped in the middle of the corridor and looked up through the hall window, trying to see any movement 40 floors above. She saw nothing, but the light remained on. He was awake. For the first time in 3 months of silent observation, Derek Cavendish was visibly awake at 4 in the morning. Arya finished cleaning the 30th floor more quickly than usual. Her anxiety grew as she approached the penthouse. She didn't know why, but she felt that something was different that night, as if the universe were rearranging itself in some subtle way. 35th floor, 37th, 39th. The service elevator was going up, but it seemed to take forever. Arya looked at her reflection in the metallic elevator door. Brown. Hair tied in a simple ponytail, tired skin, dark eyes that held more dreams than they should. She wasn't beautiful in the conventional sense. She didn't have the delicacy of Helen Cavendish, nor the elegance of the other women who frequented that building. She was just Arya, the invisible cleaner who cleaned others' mirrors but never saw herself in them. 40th floor. The elevator. Door opened directly into the private hall of the penthouse. Arya exited carefully, as she always did. Derek's apartment occupied the entire floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows that gave a privileged view of New York. Normally, she entered using the code she had memorized by watching the doormen type it, cleaned quickly and left without leaving a trace. But that night, the door was ajar. Arya stopped at the entrance, her heart racing. She had never found the door open, always locked, always protected by the electronic security system. She stood, still for a few minutes, listening. Silence, but a different silence loaded with presence. She pushed the door slowly and entered. The apartment was even more impressive than she had imagined. Very high ceilings, minimalist decoration in shades of grey and white, designer furniture that looked like works of art, and dominating everything, the immense windows that showed New York spread out below like a carpet of lights. Arya walked through the living room toward the kitchen, her steps muffled by the carpet. Everything was impeccable as always, but there was something different in the air, a subtle smell of coffee and paper, as if someone had spent the night reading. That's when she heard it, a low sound almost imperceptible, coming from the office. Arya stopped, all muscles tense. She should leave, she should go back to the elevator and pretend she had never entered, but there was something about that sound that attracted her like a magnet. She walked toward the office, each step a conscious decision to cross a line that shouldn't be crossed. The door was ajar, a strip of yellow light leaking into the hallway. Arya approached and looked through the crack. Derek Cavendish was sitting behind a huge desk, his head in his hands. There were papers scattered around him, some open notebooks, a half-empty coffee cup. He seemed smaller than in the magazine photo, more human. His hair was disheveled, his shirt wrinkled, as if he had spent all night there. Arya observed him in silence, hypnotized. This was the man who had occupied her thoughts for 3 months, the ghost of the 40th floor. And he was there, real, vulnerable, completely oblivious to her presence. Derek raised his head and picked up one of the pens on the desk. He began to write, or draw. Arya couldn't see clearly, but there was something, frantic about his movements, as if he were trying to capture something that constantly escaped. That's when he stopped writing and looked directly at the door. Arya froze. For a moment she thought he had seen her, but Derek just kept looking at the half-open door as if he were waiting for something, or someone. "I know you're there," he said, his voice low but clear. Arya felt the blood freeze in her veins. He knew. Impossible, but he knew. "You can come in," Derek continued without getting up from the chair. "I've been awake for 3 months waiting for you to have the courage." The words hit Arya like a punch to the stomach. 3 months. Exactly. The time she had been observing him. This couldn't be a coincidence. She pushed the door slowly and entered the office. Derek looked at her without surprise, as if he already knew exactly what she would look like. His green eyes scanned her face, descended over her simple figure, rose again to meet her eyes. "Arya Johnson," he said, and her name sounded different in his voice. 28 years old, night cleaner for 2 years, lives in Maplewood with her mother. Single, no children. Arya's breath caught in her throat. How did he know her full name? How did he know where she lived? "How did you—" "I observed too," Derek interrupted her, standing up from the chair. He was tall, taller than he appeared in the photos, and there was an intensity in his eyes that made her feel completely exposed. "You think you're invisible, but you're not. At least not to me." Arya took a step back, the instinct to flee screaming in her mind. But her feet seemed glued to the floor. "For 3 months you changed your routine," Derek continued, walking slowly toward her. "Started spending more time on my floor. Started arranging things that were already arranged. Started observing me. I didn't, and I started observing you back." He stopped a meter away from her, close enough for her to feel the heat emanating from his body, close enough to see the fine lines of fatigue around his eyes. "Why?" asked Arya, her voice coming out weaker than she would have liked. "Because you're the only person who comes in here and doesn't try to fix me," Derek replied. "You don't leave encouraging notes. You don't try to reorganize my life. You don't pretend to understand my pain. You just exist." Arya looked at him, trying to process his words. For 3 months she had thought she was observing him without being noticed, but he had noticed. He had seen her every movement, every subtle change in her routine. "You said you were waiting for me to have courage," she murmured. "Courage for—" "What?" Derek smiled, but it was a sad smile, loaded with irony. "To do exactly what you just did. To cross that door and really see me." They stood in silence for a long moment, studying each other. Arya could hear her own heart beating too strongly, could feel the adrenaline running through her veins. This moment was a watershed, she knew that. After this night, nothing would be the same. "Can I see what you were writing?" she asked, surprising herself with the question. Derek hesitated for a moment, then gestured toward the desk. Arya approached and looked at the scattered papers. They were drawings, dozens of hand-drawn sketches, all of her. Arya cleaning the corridors, Arya in the elevator, Arya standing at the window of the 30th floor, looking up. She picked up one of the drawings, with trembling hands. It was incredibly detailed, capturing not just her appearance but something deeper. The loneliness in her eyes, the unconscious elegance of her movements, the silent strength she carried. "How long have you been making these drawings?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. "Since the first night you changed your routine," Derek replied. "I stay awake waiting for you to pass by, and then I draw what I saw." Arya turned more pages. There were so many drawings that she lost count. Different angles, different moments. Her scene through the building's security cameras, her walking. Down the street, her getting on the bus. "Did you follow me?" she asked, a strange cold spreading through her chest. "No," Derek replied quickly. I never left this apartment to follow you, but I have access to the building's security cameras and the street and the bus stop. The revelation should have frightened her, should have made her run, but instead, Arya felt understood. For the first time in her life, someone had really seen her. Not just her physical appearance, but her essence, the person she was when she thought no one was looking. "Why me?" she asked. Derek came closer to her, close enough for her to see the golden threads in his green eyes. "Because you're like me," he said simply. "Invisible in the middle of the crowd, alone even when surrounded by people, and because—" He hesitated, as if the next words were difficult to pronounce. "Because you look at me as if I were still a real person." Arya felt something break inside her chest. It wasn't passion, not yet. It was recognition, like looking in a mirror and seeing not your reflection, but your soul. "I shouldn't be here," she murmured. "No," Derek agreed. "But you are." The silence between them stretched, loaded with unspoken possibilities. Outside, New York continued its nightlife, oblivious to the moment unfolding on the 40th floor. Arya looked again at the drawings, still processing the intensity of the attention Derek had dedicated to her. "How long have you been not sleeping?" she asked. 347 days, he replied without hesitation. The precision of the answer hit her like a slap. 347 days, almost a year since his wife's death. "And you? When was the last time you felt truly seen?" Derek's question caught her off guard. Arya thought, rewinding years of invisibility, years of being just another employee, just another ordinary woman in a city that swallowed people like her every day. "Never," she answered honestly. Derek nodded, as if he already knew the answer. "Then, maybe we can try being visible together," he said. "At least here. At least now." Arya looked at him, this man who had spent months drawing her soul without her knowing, this man who had lost everything and yet had found something in her worth capturing on paper. "I need to go," she said finally. "My shift ends in an hour and my mother—" "I know about your mother," Derek interrupted her gently. "Alzheimer's moderate stage. You take care of her alone." Once again, his knowledge of her life should have frightened her. But there was something in the way he spoke, without judgment, just understanding, that reassured her. "How do you know so many things about me?" "Because I needed to understand why you fascinate me so much," he replied. "And the more I discovered, the more fascinated I became." Arya put the drawings back on the desk, but her hands were shaking slightly. This encounter had changed something fundamental in her perception of herself. She was no longer the invisible cleaner. She was someone worthy of being observed, studied, drawn. "Can I come back?" she asked, surprising herself again. "I'll be here," Derek replied. "Every night. Waiting." Arya nodded and headed for the door. She stopped at the threshold and turned to look at him once more. He had gone back to the desk and picked up a pen, but his eyes were fixed on her. "Derek?" "Yes?" "Thank you for seeing." "Me?" He smiled, and this time the smile reached his eyes. "Thank you for letting me see you." Arya left the apartment and entered the elevator, her heart still beating hard. As she descended the 40 floors, she looked at her reflection in the metallic door. For the first time, her reflection didn't seem empty. There was something there, a light that didn't exist before. When she reached the ground floor, Arya finished cleaning the last corridors automatically, her mind still in Derek's office. In the drawings, in his words, in the way he had seen her not just with his eyes but with something deeper. She left the building at 6 in the morning, as always, but she was no longer the same person who had entered 6 hours before. Something had changed irreversibly. She had been seen. And for the first time in 28 years of life, that mattered more than anything else. 3 days passed since that dawn in the office, and Arya couldn't get the drawings out of her head. Each line traced by Derek seemed to have engraved something permanent on her soul, as if he had used not graphite but fire. She continued her work normally, but now there was a constant expectation running through her veins. Each night, when the elevator went up toward the 40th floor, her heart accelerated, as if it were the first time. On the fourth night, she found an envelope slipped under the penthouse door. Her name was written on the front, in the same precise handwriting as the drawings. Inside, a formal job offer, printed on Cavendish Laboratories letterhead. Personal assistant, salary 3 times higher than her current one, flexible hours, complete benefits for her and her mother. Arya read the document twice, her hands trembling slightly. At the end of the page, a handwritten line. If you accept, destroy your current work contract and come meet me tomorrow at 10 at night. If you don't accept, leave this paper where you found it and we'll never speak of this again. The choice is yours. D. She stood in the hallway for long minutes, the paper heavy in her hands. She knew that accepting meant crossing a definitive line, ceasing to be the invisible cleaner to become, what? The assistant to a man who had been observing her for months? The employee of someone who had captured her soul on paper without permission? But when she thought of her mother, of the medical bills that were piling up, of the sleepless nights taking care of a woman who each day forgot a little more of who she was, the decision became simple. Arya folded the paper, put it in her bag, and continued cleaning. The next morning she went to the Human Resources Department of the cleaning company and resigned. The supervisor looked at her with surprise. She was one of their most reliable employees, but didn't ask questions. Arya made up a story about a better opportunity in another city. Lying had become surprisingly easy since she met Derek. She returned home and found her mother sitting in the kitchen, looking out the window with a lost expression. Alzheimer's was too cruel a word to describe what was happening to Connie. It was as if someone were erasing her mother slowly, one memory at a time. "Mom, I got a better job," Arya announced, sitting next to her. Connie turned her face and looked at her with childlike curiosity. "Who are you, dear?" The question hit Arya as it always did, like a dagger straight to the heart, but she smiled and held her mother's hand. "I'm Arya, your daughter, and I'm going to take better care of you now." Connie nodded, seeming to understand for a few seconds before turning back to look out the window. At 10 at night, Arya was back at Skyview Tower, but this time she didn't use the service elevator. The receptionist greeted her with surprise and consulted a list before releasing her entry into the social elevator. When the doors opened on the 40th floor, Derek was waiting for her. He wore dark jeans and a grey long-sleeved shirt. Simple clothes that made him look younger, more accessible, but his eyes still had that intensity that left her breathless. "You came," he said, as if he wasn't sure she would appear. "I came," confirmed Arya, still not fully believing she was there. "Come in. I need to show you some things." The apartment was different from the last time. There were papers spread over the dining table, an open laptop, piles of organized folders. It seemed that Derek had transformed the living room into an improvised office. "What is all this?" asked Arya. "Your new role," he replied, gesturing for her to sit. "Officially, you'll be my personal assistant. You'll organize my schedule, answer phone calls, handle correspondence, things any assistant would do. And unofficially." Derek sat across from her, his eyes fixed on hers. "Unofficially, you're going to help me discover the truth about my wife's death." The words hung in the air between them like a heavy confession. Arya felt a strange chill run down her spine. "I thought it was a car accident." "That's what everyone thought," Derek said, his voice low. Helen was returning from the laboratory. It was almost midnight. It was raining. The car skidded on the highway and hit the guardrail. She died instantly. So it was indeed an accident. Maybe. Or maybe someone made it look like an accident. Arya studied him, trying to read his expression. There was something more than pain in his eyes. There was mistrust. Paranoia, perhaps. "Why do you think that?" Derek got up and walked to the table where the papers were. He picked up a folder and came back to her. Helen was a biochemist. She worked on developing new medications for the laboratory. In the last months before her death, she was involved in a special project, ultra-secret. Not even I knew exactly what it was about. He opened the folder and showed some documents to Arya. Technical reports, graphs, handwritten notes. 3. Days before the accident, Helen told me she had discovered something important, something that would change everything. She was agitated, anxious. She said she needed a few more days to confirm her results. And what did she discover? I don't know. All the project files disappeared after her death. The laboratory said that it was a system error, that the backups were corrupted, but Helen was meticulous. She always kept physical copies of everything. Arya leafed through the documents, trying to understand the technical language. Most of it was beyond her comprehension, but she could tell it was related to medications for neurological diseases. You think someone killed your wife because of this project? I think Helen discovered something that someone didn't want discovered, Derek replied, and I think that person is still out there. Arya looked at him, beginning to understand the dimension of what he was proposing. And you want me to help you investigate this? You'll be my official assistant. You'll have access to files, meetings, conversations. People speak more freely in front of assistants. They don't pay attention. You'll be invisible again, but this time for a good reason. The irony wasn't lost on Arya. He wanted to use exactly what she most hated about herself, her invisibility, as a tool. And if we discover something, if there really is someone responsible for her death, then we'll get justice, Derek said, and there was something cold in his voice that made Arya shiver. They were silent for a few minutes. Arya reread some of the documents, processing the proposal. It wasn't just a job he was offering, it was a conspiracy, a hunt, a way to give meaning to his own pain by transforming it into something productive. Why me? She finally asked. Why not hire a private investigator, someone with experience? Derek came closer to her, close enough for her to feel the heat of his body. Because you see me, he said simply, and because I need someone I can trust completely. You trust me? You barely know me. I've observed you for 3 months. I know how you work, how you treat people, how you take care of your mother. I know you have an integrity that most people don't. His words touched something deep in Arya. No one had ever spoken about her integrity. No one had ever noticed the way she cared for her mother, or the care with which she treated even the simplest work. I accept, she said, surprising herself with the quickness of the decision. Are you sure? This could be dangerous. My whole life has been dangerous, Arya replied. At least now it will be dangerous for a reason. Derek smiled, and again it was a smile that reached his eyes. Then welcome to Cavendish Laboratories, Arya Johnson. Insight. The days that followed, Arya immersed herself in a completely new routine. She arrived at the laboratory at 8 in the morning and stayed until late afternoon, organizing Derek's schedule, answering calls, participating in meetings. It was strange to be in a corporate environment after years of cleaning empty offices, but she adapted quickly. The laboratory was impressive. 5 floors of cutting-edge research, laboratories equipped with state-of-the-art technology, teams of scientists working on projects that could change world medicine. And at the center of it all, Derek, commanding the empire he had inherited. With a mixture of natural competence and emotional disinterest, Arya quickly realized that he was respected, but not liked. The employees spoke to him formally, kept their distance. It was as if Helen's death had created an invisible barrier around him. During meetings, Arya took notes and observed the dynamics. There were subtle tensions, exchanged glances, biased comments. The laboratory wasn't just a workplace, it was a political minefield where each discovery could be worth millions, and each researcher guarded their secrets carefully. It was in the second week that she found the first real clue. She was organizing the files in Derek's office when she discovered a locked drawer in his desk. When she asked about it, he hesitated before answering. They're Helen's personal things, documents she kept here. Can I see? Derek took a small key from his keychain and opened the drawer. Inside were notebooks, photos, some personal objects. Arya picked up one of the notebooks and began to leaf through it. Helen's notes were precise, organized. But as Arya advanced through the pages, the notes became more erratic, more urgent. In the last entries, the handwriting was almost illegible, as if she had written in a hurry or under stress. Look at this. Arya showed a page to Derek. She Wrote RK-47 several times, and here at the bottom, they can't know, not yet. Derek frowned. RK-47 must be the project code, but what did she mean by they can't know? Arya continued leafing through. A few pages later, she found something that made her blood run cold. "Derek," she called, her voice tense. "Look here." On the page was a drawing, crude, done in haste, but unmistakable. It was a woman's face, a woman who looked very much like Teresa. Derek took the notebook from her hands, studying the drawing. "This is impossible," he murmured. "Helen died more than a year ago. I only met you 2 weeks ago." But Arya was looking at the date in the corner of the page. The drawing had been made 3 months before Helen's death, 4 months before she started working in Derek's building. "How did she know what I looked like?" Arya asked, her voice almost a whisper. Derek quickly turned more pages. There were other drawings, all of her. Arya walking down a street that she recognized as being near her house. Arya at the bus stop. Arya entering a supermarket. Helen. "Followed me," Arya said, a cold realization spreading through her chest. "She knew who I was before she died." "But why?" Derek was visibly disturbed. "Why would Helen draw you? How did she know you?" Arya took the notebook back and studied the drawings more carefully. There was something familiar about them, something that touched a distant memory. "Derek," she said slowly, "do you have old photos of yourself from when you were a child?" He looked at her without understanding, but went to a cabinet and took out a photo album. He began to leaf through it, showing images of his childhood, adolescence, youth. Arya stopped at a specific photo. Derek at 16 at a charity event. In the background, a crowd of people, and in the corner of the photo, almost out of the frame, a dark-haired girl. "That's me," Arya said, pointing to the distant figure. "I must have been about 15. My mother took me to this event because they were distributing free food." Derek looked at the photo, then at her, then at Helen's drawings. "Helen must have seen this photo," he said. "But why would that matter to her?" "I don't know," Arya admitted, "but clearly it mattered enough for her to follow me and draw me." They spent the rest of the afternoon analyzing Helen's notebooks, looking for more clues. They found references to secret meetings, to pressure from superiors, to discoveries that would change everything, but nothing that explained the connection to Arya. It was when it was already getting dark that Derek found something. "Here," he said, pointing to a note at the end of the last notebook. Helen wrote, "AJ is the key. She doesn't know, but she's the key to everything." "AJ," Arya repeated. "Arya Johnson. She knew your full name," Derek said, his voice tense. "She knew who you were and believed you were important for something." Arya felt as if the floor were moving beneath her feet. For weeks she had thought that her connection with Derek was coincidence, fate, perhaps. Now she discovered that her presence in his life had been predicted, planned, by a dead woman. "I need to go home," she said abruptly. "I need to think about this." "Arya, wait." But she was already getting up, picking up her bag. The discovery had shaken something fundamental in her perception of reality. Who was she really? And what role had Helen predicted she would play? "We'll continue tomorrow," she said, heading for the door. "Arya." She stopped at the threshold and turned around. Derek was standing beside the table, a vulnerable expression on his face. "Whatever the truth is, it doesn't change what I feel for you." The sheer words hit her like lightning. It was the first time he had mentioned feelings, the first time he had put into words what had been growing between them. "Derek, I know it's complicated. I know there's a lot we don't understand. But this thing that exists between us, this is real." Arya looked at him, this man who had entered her life like a hurricane, changing everything. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that his feelings were real and not part of some elaborate plan by a dead woman. "I need time," she said finally. "You have all the time you need." Arya left the laboratory with her mind in turmoil. During the journey back home, she tried to process everything she had discovered. Helen had observed her, had predicted her role in Derek's life. But what did that mean? And why did Helen think she was the key? When she got home, she found her mother watching television. Connie looked at her with a vague smile. "Hi, dear. Where do you work again?" "In a laboratory, Mum, with medications." "That's nice. Medications are important." Arya prepared dinner in silence, lost in thought. Then she helped her mother take a bath and get ready for bed. It was only when she was taking care of Connie that she could temporarily forget her own worries. Later, alone in her room, Arya took an old box she kept under the bed. Inside were photos, documents, memories from her childhood. She searched until she found what she was looking for: old photos of herself. She compared them with the drawings Helen had made. The resemblance was undeniable. Helen had observed her with enough attention to capture not just her appearance, but her expressions, her gestures. Arya lay on the bed, but sleep didn't come. Her mind was full of unanswered questions. Who was Helen really? What had she discovered about the RK-47 project, and what was the role that Arya was supposed to play in all of this? The next morning, she arrived at the laboratory determined to find answers. Derek greeted her with a coffee and a cautious smile. "Did you sleep well?" "No," she replied honestly, "but I'm ready to continue." They spent the morning reviewing more documents, looking for clues about the RK-47 project. Arya used her access to the files to look for any reference to the code. It was in the medical files that she found something interesting. "Derek, look at this," she called, pointing to the computer screen. "RK-47 appears here as an experimental medication for Alzheimer's." Derek approached and read over her shoulder. "Development suspended due to serious side effects," he read aloud. "Clinical trials interrupted." "But look at the date," Arya pointed. "The tests were suspended after Helen's death." "She was working on a medication for Alzheimer's," Derek murmured, "and thought you were the key." The connection hit Arya like an electric shock. Her mother. Connie had Alzheimer's. "She knew about my mother," Arya said, her voice almost a whisper. "Somehow, Helen knew that my mother had Alzheimer's." Derek looked at her with an intense expression. What if Helen wasn't just developing a generic medication? What if she was developing something specific? Specific for what? For your mother's type of Alzheimer's, for your family's genetics. The possibility was both frightening and fascinating at the same time. Arya thought about the precision of Helen's drawings, the attention to detail, the way she had written, "AJ is the key." "We need more information," she said. "We need to find out exactly what Helen was doing." "I know how to get it," Derek said, "but you won't like it." "What do you have in mind?" "Helen had a private laboratory at home. I locked everything up after she died, never had the courage to touch it. But if there are answers, they're there." The idea of entering Helen's personal laboratory, of touching the intimate things of a dead woman, made Arya feel like an intruder, but the need to understand was greater than the discomfort. "When?" "Tonight, after everyone leaves." The rest of the day passed slowly. Arya tried to concentrate on work, but her mind was constantly returning to what they would discover in Helen's laboratory. Would there really be something there that would explain her connection to all this, or just more mysteries? At 8. At night, when the laboratory was empty, Derek took her to the basement of the building. There was a restricted area, accessible only with a special card. Helen's personal laboratory was at the end of a dimly lit corridor. Derek hesitated in front of the door. "No one has entered here since she died," he said. "Not even me." "Do you want me to go in first?" He nodded, passing the card through the electronic lock. The door opened with a soft click. The laboratory was exactly as Helen had left it. Research equipment, microscopes, hundreds of vials with different substances, and scattered everywhere, more notebooks, more notes, more drawings. Arya walked through the space, touching the objects with reverence. There was something intimate there, as if she were invading not just a laboratory, but a woman's soul. It was at a desk in the corner that she found it, a thick file with her name written on the cover. "Arya Johnson, Project RK-47, Experimental Phase." Arya opened the file with trembling hands. Inside were photos of her, copies of medical documents, genetic history of her family, and a detailed report on her mother's Alzheimer's. "Derek," she called, her voice coming out weaker than intended. "You need to see this." He approached and looked over her shoulder as she read. Helen had studied Connie's specific case. She had mapped her genetics, analyzed the progression of the disease, compared it with other cases, and she had developed an experimental medication specifically for that type of Alzheimer's. "She wanted to test the medication on your mother," Derek said, reading one of the notes. "No," Arya corrected, pointing to a specific line. "She wanted to test it on me." The phrase was underlined several times. "AJ carries the necessary genetic markers, would be the ideal test for the preventive efficacy of RK47. "Preventive," Derek repeated. "She didn't want to cure your mother's Alzheimer's. She wanted to prevent you from developing the disease." Arya felt as if the world had stopped. Helen had discovered that she had a genetic predisposition to develop Alzheimer's, and she had created a medication to prevent this. "Why would she do this for me?" Arya asked. "She didn't even know me." Derek turned more pages of the file. On the last sheet, he found the answer. An old photo in black and white. Two girls, of about 10, playing in a park. One was clearly Helen, the other— "It's you," Derek said, looking from the photo to Arya. "You knew each other when you were children." Arya studied the photo, searching her memory. And then, like a flash, the memory returned. Helen, the rich girl who sometimes appeared in the public park near her house. They had played together a few times during one summer. Helen always brought by the nanny, she always alone because her mother worked. "I remember her," Arya whispered. "She was kind to me. She gave me candy, shared her toys." "And she remembered you," Derek said. "All these years later, she remembered." Arya continued leafing through the file. There were more notes, more details about the development of the medication. And then, in the last pages, something that made her blood freeze. "Derek, look at this. Helen wrote that someone was trying to sabotage the research, that there was pressure to suspend the project." "From whom?" "It doesn't say. But here she writes, D needs to know the truth about me and about A. If something happens to me, he has to continue the work." Derek took the file from her hands, reading Helen's last notes. "She knew she was in danger," he said, "and she wanted me to find you." "She orchestrated everything," Arya realized. "My job in the building, our proximity, everything. She knew that if something happened to her, you would find me." "But how did she manage to get you hired to work in the building?" Arya thought for a moment, trying to remember the details of her hiring 2 years before. "The vacancy appeared out of nowhere," she said slowly. "The woman who interviewed me said my profile was exactly what they were looking for. At the time, I found it strange because I didn't have much experience. Helen used her influence to have you hired," Derek concluded. "She planned everything." They were silent for a few minutes, processing the magnitude of the discovery. Helen had manipulated their lives even before she died, creating an elaborate plan for them to meet. "I'm confused," Arya admitted. "What I feel for you, is it real or is it part of her plan?" Derek came closer to her, taking her hands. "What do you feel when you look at me?" "As if I've known you for years," she replied honestly. "As if you were the missing part. And do you think that can be fabricated, manipulated?" Arya looked into his eyes, losing herself in the deep green that had fascinated her since their first meeting. "I don't know what's real anymore." Derek leaned toward her, their faces inches apart. "This is real," he whispered and kissed her. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, as if he were asking permission. But when Arya responded, entwining her fingers in his hair, the kiss deepened, carrying months of accumulated tension. Arya lost herself in the sensation, in the taste of him, in the heat of his hands. For a moment, all questions about Helen and plans and manipulations disappeared. There was only that moment, that connection. But then reality returned like a bucket of cold water. Arya pulled away abruptly, her breathing irregular. "I can't," she said, taking a step back. "Not like this, not here. Arya, this place, these discoveries, all of this, it's hers." Arya gestured to the laboratory around them. It's as if she were here controlling everything. Derek lowered his hands, respecting her space. You're right. I'm sorry. It's not that I don't want to, she hurried to clarify. It's that I need to know where her plan ends and where my true feelings begin. And how will we discover that? Arya looked around the laboratory, at all the traces of Helen's presence. We need to find out who killed her. We need to understand completely what happened. Only then will I be able to separate what is manipulation from what is real. Derek nodded, understanding. Then let's discover the truth, all of it. They spent another hour in the laboratory, collecting evidence, photographing documents. When they finally left, Arya felt as if she had crossed another threshold. She was no longer just an assistant, helping her boss investigate a suspicious death. She was a central piece in a puzzle that had begun long before she was born. In the elevator, going back up to the ground floor, Derek broke the silence. Regardless of what we discover about Helen, there's one thing I know for certain. What? I'm not in love with you because of some plan of hers. I'm in love because you are extraordinary. The confession hung between them, honest and vulnerable. Arya wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that his feelings were genuine. But there were too many unanswered questions. Derek, The elevator doors opened on the ground floor, interrupting what she was going to say. Outside, a man in a dark suit was waiting for them. Tall, older, with cold eyes that seemed to capture every detail. Mr. Cavendish, the man said, his voice formal. We need to talk. Derek stiffened beside Arya. Dr. Martinez, he replied, his voice cautious. What brings you here so late? Urgent matters, the man replied, his eyes moving to Arya. Private. Anything you have to say can be said in front of my assistant. Dr. Martinez smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant smile. I'm afraid not, Mr. Cavendish. It's about your late wife and about certain nighttime activities that have been drawing attention. Arya felt a chill down her spine. Somehow someone knew they were investigating, and now it was clear they weren't alone in this hunt. The silence in the laboratory lobby was so dense that Arya could hear her own heart beating. Dr. Martinez remained standing before them, his angular features illuminated by the cold lights of the corridor. There was something predatory in his eyes, as if he were a hunter who had finally cornered his prey. Miss Johnson, isn't it? He said, extending his hand to Arya. Dr. Richard Martinez, Scientific Director of Cavendish Laboratories. Arya hesitated before shaking his hand. The grip was too firm, too long, as if he were marking territory. Nice to meet you, she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. The pleasure is all mine. Helen told me a lot about you. The words fell like a bomb between them. Derek visibly stiffened, and Arya felt as if the floor had moved beneath her feet. Helen never mentioned you to me, Derek said, his voice controlled but tense. There are many things Helen didn't mention to you, my dear Derek, Dr. Martinez replied with a cold smile. For example, that she was working for me in the last months of her life. That's impossible, Helen reported directly to me. Officially, yes. But some projects require absolute discretion. Dr. Martinez gestured for them to follow him. Let's talk somewhere more private. I'm sure you have many questions. Arya exchanged a quick glance with Derek. Every instinct in her screamed not to follow that man, but they needed answers, and Dr. Martinez clearly had information they didn't possess. My office is on the top floor, Dr. Martinez continued, heading for the main elevator. I believe it will be more appropriate for our conversation. During the ride up, the silence was broken only by the hum of the elevator. Arya could feel the tension emanating from Derek beside her. Dr. Martinez, on the other hand, seemed completely relaxed, as if he were in total control of the situation. Dr. Martinez's office occupied half of the top floor of the laboratory. The walls were lined with shelves of medical and scientific books, framed diplomas, and photos with important personalities. A huge desk dominated the center of the room, with leather chairs strategically arranged around it. Please, sit down, he said, gesturing to the chairs. Can I offer you something to drink? Coffee? Water? Get to the point, Derek said, refusing to sit. What do you know about Helen? Dr. Martinez settled behind his desk, fingers interlaced. Helen Cavendish was one of the most brilliant minds I've ever met, he began. She was also one of the most dangerous. What do you mean, dangerous? Arya asked, finally sitting down. She had an unhealthy obsession with certain aspects of her research, the RK-47 project, for example. Dr. Martinez opened a drawer and took out a thick folder. I suppose you've already found references to this project. Derek remained standing, muscles tense. We know it was an experimental medication for Alzheimer's. It was much more than that, Dr. Martinez corrected. It was Helen's attempt to rewrite human genetics, to eradicate not just Alzheimer's, but an entire category of neurological diseases. He opened the folder and spread some documents on the desk. Arya recognized some of the reports she had seen in Helen's personal laboratory. The problem, Doctor, Martinez continued, is that Helen had become personally involved with one of the test cases. She was no longer thinking like a scientist, but like an obsessed woman. Obsessed with what? Derek asked, though Arya had the feeling he already knew the answer. With Miss Johnson, of course. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Arya felt the blood drain from her face. I don't understand. Helen had identified you as the perfect test subject for RK-47, Dr. Martinez explained calmly. Your genetic predisposition, your family history, everything aligned perfectly with the research parameters. But at some point, her scientific motivation transformed into something personal. Dr. Martinez turned one of the pages and pointed to a handwritten note. Helen wrote here, I can't let happen to A what happened to my mother. She was projecting her own family history onto you, Miss Johnson. Helen's mother died of Alzheimer's, Derek said slowly, the pieces falling into place. Helen was just a child when it happened. Exactly. And when she found you again, Dr. Martinez gestured to Arya, she saw an opportunity to save someone from suffering the same fate. The problem is that she began making decisions that compromised the entire research. Arya felt sick. The idea that Helen had manipulated her life because of her own unresolved traumas was disturbing. What kind of decisions? She asked. Helen began developing the medication specifically for your genetics, ignoring all other test cases. She diverted resources, falsified reports, lied to the board about the progress of the research. Dr. Martinez stood up and walked to the window looking at the city below. When I discovered what she was doing, I tried to intervene, but Helen had become unstable. She threatened to expose certain less ethical aspects of our other projects. If I tried to stop RK-47, what less ethical aspects? Derek asked, his voice dangerously low. Dr. Martinez turned to them, a cynical smile on his face. Do you really believe that Cavendish Laboratories became one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the country, just with ethical research? Derek, your father was a pragmatic man. Sometimes scientific progress requires moral flexibility. What are you talking about? Tests on vulnerable populations, medications released before safety tests were complete, suppression of negative results that could affect sales. Dr. Martinez returned to his chair. Helen had documentation of all this, and she threatened to make it all public if I interfered. With her precious RK-47 project, Arya felt as if she were on an emotional roller coaster. Each revelation completely changed her understanding of the situation. So you killed her? She asked directly. Dr. Martinez laughed, a humorless sound. I didn't need to kill her, Miss Johnson. Helen killed herself. What do you mean? Derek approached the desk, his hands resting on the surface. Helen was testing RK-47 on herself, Dr. Martinez revealed. Experimental doses that she had developed specifically for your genetics. The problem is that she didn't have the same genetic predisposition that you have, Miss Johnson. Arya felt like she was going to vomit. She was taking the medication for weeks, and she was having severe adverse reactions. Hallucinations, paranoia, loss of motor coordination. Dr. Martinez leafed through some papers. On the night she died, Helen had taken a particularly high dose. Her capabilities were completely compromised when she left the laboratory. You're saying the accident was caused by the medication? Derek asked, his voice tense. I'm saying that Helen was in an altered mental state when she decided to drive that night. The accident was an inevitable consequence of her own reckless choices. Arya abruptly stood up, walking to the window. She needed air, space, time to process everything she was hearing. Why are you telling us this now? She asked without turning around. Because you've been meddling in things that should have been buried with Helen, Dr. Martinez replied, and because I need to make sure you understand the consequences of continuing this investigation. Derek approached Arya, stopping beside her at the window. What consequences? Helen documented many things, Derek, including her own mental deterioration in the last weeks. If this information became public, it would not only destroy Cavendish Laboratories' reputation, but could implicate you as an accomplice in her activities. Accomplice how? You were married to her, you were her direct supervisor. An ambitious prosecutor could argue that you knew what she was doing and chose not to intervene. Arya turned to look at Dr. Martinez. Are you threatening us? I'm offering protection, he corrected. To both of you, all you need to do is stop digging up the past and move on with your lives. And if we don't stop? Derek asked. Dr. Martinez smiled, but there was coldness in his eyes. Then you'll discover that Helen wasn't the only unstable person involved in this situation. The threatening tone was unmistakable. Arya felt a chill run down her spine. We're leaving, she said, heading for the door. Miss Johnson, Dr. Martinez called her. One last thing. You should know that Helen left specific instructions about you. Instructions that included your hiring at this laboratory. Arya stopped at the threshold. What kind of instructions? She wanted you to be hired as Derek's assistant. She wanted you two to meet. She wanted you to connect. Dr. Martinez paused. She believed that if Derek fell in love with you, he would continue her research after her death. The words hit Arya like a punch to the stomach. Everything had been planned. Every moment, every feeling, every connection she thought was genuine had been orchestrated by a dead woman. That's not true, Derek said, but his voice sounded less convincing than before. Verify for yourselves, Dr. Martinez said, handing an envelope to Arya. These are Helen's original instructions, her own words. Arya took the envelope with trembling hands, but didn't open it. Why are you doing this? She asked. Because I prefer that you know the truth and decide to stop on your own, rather than having to take more direct measures. Derek positioned himself between Dr. Martinez and Arya. If you touch her... I don't need to touch anyone, Dr. Martinez interrupted him. Just one call to the medical board questioning Miss Johnson's mental stability. After all, she has a history of psychotic episodes, doesn't she? Arya's blood froze. How did he know about her episodes at 17? How did you... I know many things, Miss Johnson, including the fact that you kept a newspaper photo clipping of Derek and Helen for years before meeting him personally. The revelation was like a slap in the face. Arya had completely forgotten about the photo she kept under her pillow when she was a teenager. How could Dr. Martinez know about that? You investigated me, she said, her voice coming out weaker than intended. Investigation is a very strong word. I prefer to think of it as due diligence. Helen had invested a lot in you, Miss Johnson. I needed to understand why. Derek took a step toward Dr. Martinez, but Arya held him by the arm. Let's go, she said, now. They left the office in silence, but Arya could feel Dr. Martinez's eyes on her back. Only when they were in the elevator going down did she realize she was still holding the envelope. Don't open that here, Derek said, seeing her look at the envelope. Why not? Because we don't know if he's listening to us. They left the laboratory in silence, but Arya could feel the weight of the envelope in her hands as if it were made of lead. During the journey to Derek's car, her mind was in turmoil. Dr. Martinez had revealed so many things that she didn't know how to process it all. Where are we going? Derek asked when they got in the car. My house, Arya replied without thinking. I need to check something. During the ride, they remained silent. Arya looked out the window, watching the city pass by, but her mind was turned to the past, to the teenager she had been, dealing with psychotic episodes that no one could explain, to the newspaper photo she had kept for years without understanding why. When they arrived at Aria's house in Maplewood, she hesitated before inviting Derek in. "My mother might not recognize you," she warned, "and sometimes she gets agitated with strangers." "That's okay." The house was small but cozy, with simple furniture and family photos scattered on the walls. Connie was sitting in the living room watching television. When she saw Derek, she looked at him with curiosity. "Hi, Mom," Aria said, kissing her forehead. "This is Derek, a friend of mine." "Very nice to meet you, Mrs. Johnson," Derek said, extending his hand. Connie studied him for a moment, then smiled. "You have beautiful eyes," she said simply. Aria felt a wave of affection for her mother. Even with the disease, Connie could still be sweet. "Mom, I'm going to show some papers to Derek in my room, okay?" "Okay, dear." Aria led Derek to her room, which was even simpler than the rest of the house. A twin bed, an old dresser, some photos on the wall. She went directly to under the bed and pulled out a shoebox. "What are you looking for?" Derek asked. "The proof that Dr. Martinez is right about at least one thing." Aria opened the box and rummaged among the papers and old photos until she found what she was looking for, a yellowed newspaper clipping carefully preserved in plastic. It was a photo of Derek and Helen at a charity event, exactly as Dr. Martinez had mentioned. They were smiling for the camera, she in a white dress, he in a tuxedo. They looked like the perfect couple. "When did you clip this?" Derek asked, taking the photo. "I was 17, Aria replied, sitting on the edge of the bed. "I was going through a very difficult period. I had episodes where I lost contact with reality. Psychotic episodes. The doctors never could diagnose exactly what it was, but I saw things, heard voices, and had strange obsessions." She gestured to the photo. "Like this one." "Why did you keep this specific photo?" Aria sighed, trying to access painful memories. "I can't explain. When I saw it in the newspaper, it was as if I already knew you, as if you were important somehow." She paused. "I used to look at the photo and make up stories about you, about what it would be like if I were part of that life." Derek sat next to her on the bed. "How many years was this before you started working in the building?" "About 8, 9 years. "And you never remembered the photo when you saw me in person?" "Not consciously, but maybe subconsciously." Aria looked at him. "Maybe that's why I felt so attracted to you from the beginning." They were silent for a few minutes, processing the implications. Aria's teenage obsession with a newspaper photo had transformed years later into a real obsession with the man in the photo. "Open the envelope," Derek said finally. With trembling hands, Aria tore open the envelope and took out the sheets. Inside, it was Helen's handwriting, but a more desperate version than she had seen in the notebooks. "Read it aloud," Derek asked. Aria took a deep breath and began. "If someone is reading this, it means something has happened to me. Derek, I know you're confused and hurt, but you need to understand that everything I did was out of love, not just for you, but for Aria." Aria's voice failed for a moment. She cleared her throat and continued. "When I was a child, Aria saved me from drowning in the park lake. She was only 9 years old, but she jumped into the water to pull me out. I never could forget that gesture. She saved my life, and I always knew that one day I would have to repay her." Aria stopped reading, confused. "I don't remember that," she said. "Keep reading." "Years later, when I discovered that she was developing the same neurological symptoms that my mother had, I knew this was my chance to save her as she saved me. But I also knew that I would need Derek's help to continue my research after my death." Aria turned the page, her hands trembling more with each word. "That's why I planned everything. Her hiring at the building, your meeting. I knew that if Derek saw who Aria really is, her strength, her kindness, her beauty, he would fall in love with her. And I knew that if he fell in love, he would do anything to save her. She planned our passion," Derek said, his voice empty. But maybe she was wrong about one thing, Arya continued reading. Maybe you fall in love not because I planned it, but despite me having planned it. Maybe your love is real, even if the circumstances were artificial. Arya put the sheets in her lap, not able to read anymore. Is there more? Derek asked. She leaves instructions on how to continue the RK-47 research, and Arya hesitated. She says that if you truly love me, you'll give me the choice to take the medication or not. What medication? Arya picked up the sheets again and looked for the passage. Helen wrote, I left enough doses of RK-47 hidden in the laboratory. If Arya wants to try to prevent Alzheimer's, the choice must be hers. But Derek must know that the medication is experimental and dangerous. It can save her or it can kill her. They were silent, the weight of the revelations hanging between them. Helen had planned not just their meeting, but an entire sequence of events that would lead them to this moment. Do you want to take the medication? Derek finally asked. I don't know, Arya answered honestly. I don't know anymore what's real and what's manipulation. Are your feelings for me real? Arya looked at him, losing herself in the green eyes she had memorized years before in a newspaper photo. I can't distinguish anymore. For years I kept your photo because I felt some inexplicable connection. Now we discover that Helen planned everything. How can I know if what I feel is genuine or the result of conditioning? Derek came closer to her, taking her hands. What if it doesn't matter? What do you mean? What if it doesn't matter how it began? What if all that matters is how we continue from now on? Arya wanted to believe him, but there was too much. Fear in her heart. What if I'm crazy? What if the psychotic episodes come back? What if all this is just an elaboration of my sick mind? Then we'll face it together. You don't understand, Arya stood up, walking to the window. When I was 17, I spent 3 months institutionalized. I couldn't distinguish between reality and fantasy. And now what? Now I'm living a fantasy that I invented when I was a teenager. How can I be sure I'm not having another episode? Derek stood up and walked to her. Because I'm here. Because this is real. Because when I touch you, you feel it. He put his hands on her face, forcing her to look at him. Arya, I didn't fall in love with you because Helen planned it. I fell in love because you're impossible not to love. Because you take care of your mother with such dedication that it breaks my heart. Because you clean mirrors as if each reflection mattered. Because you see me, even when I'm invisible. Tears began to stream down Arya's face. But what if Dr. Martinez is right? What if Helen was right about my genetic prognosis? What if I'm going to develop Alzheimer's like my mother? Then we'll enjoy every moment we have. And if there's a chance the medication works, we'll try it. And if the medication kills me like it almost killed Helen, then at least you'll have made a choice, your choice. Arya let herself be embraced by him, feeling the warmth and solidity of his body. For a moment, all doubts dissipated. There was only that embrace, that moment, that feeling of belonging. But then she remembered Dr. Martinez's words. Derek, we need to talk about Dr. Martinez. What about him? He knows intimate details of my life that no one should know. How? Derek moved away slightly to look at her. Helen must have told him. Or he investigated me long before Helen died. Arya paused. What if he's more involved in her death than he admitted? You think he killed her? I think he knows more than he's saying, and I think we're a threat to him somehow. From the living room, they heard Connie's voice calling for Arya. Arya, who is this man in our house? Arya sighed. Her mother had forgotten about Derek in less than an hour. I need to take care of her, she said, heading for the door. Arya, Derek called her. What do you want to do about all this? She stopped at the threshold, thinking. I want to discover the truth, all of it, about Helen, about Dr. Martinez, about me. She turned to look at him. And I want to find out if what we feel for each other can survive the truth. And if it can't? Then at least we'll know we tried. Arya left the room to take care of her mother, leaving Derek alone with Helen's letters, while she helped Connie get ready for bed. Her mind was in turmoil. So many revelations, so many unanswered questions. When she returned to the room, she found Derek sitting on the bed, reading Helen's instructions about the medication. "It's complex," he said, "but feasible. You understand the chemistry?" Enough. Helen was brilliant, but she wasn't the only person capable of understanding her work. Arya sat beside him. "What do you think we should do?" "I think we should be very careful. Dr. Martinez wasn't bluffing about the threats. He has enough power to destroy our lives if he wants. So we stop?" "No," Derek said, surprising her, "but we change our strategy. We get smarter." "How?" "First, we need a backup copy of everything we've discovered. If something happens to us, someone else needs to know the truth. And second? Second, we need to find out exactly what Dr. Martinez is hiding. Why is he so desperate to stop us?" Arya nodded, feeling a determination growing within her. "And third? Third, you need to decide if you want to try Helen's medication." The question hung between them like a suspended sword. Arya knew this decision would change everything, not just her medical future, but the entire dynamic of their relationship. "I have time to think?" "All the time you need." Later, after Derek left, Arya stayed up late looking at the yellowed newspaper photo. The young couple smiling back at her seemed so distant now, so innocent. They didn't know that the blonde woman would die young, that the green-eyed man would become obsessed with his own pain, that the troubled girl who kept their photo would become a central piece in a game much bigger than any of them could imagine. Arya put the photo back in the box, but kept Helen's letters beside her. There was still much she didn't understand, much that didn't make sense. But one thing was becoming clear. She was no longer the invisible cleaner who cleaned mirrors without seeing herself in them. She was someone important enough for people to risk their lives to save her or to stop her. And for the first time in her life, this didn't frighten her. It empowered her. The 3 days following the meeting with Dr. Martinez passed like a silent storm. Arya arrived at the laboratory every morning, feeling as if she were walking in enemy territory. Every look from the employees seemed loaded with suspicion, every conversation interrupted when she passed through the corridors. Dr. Martinez hadn't appeared again, but his presence was felt in every shadow, in every security camera that followed her movements. Derek tried to maintain normalcy, but Arya noticed the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes constantly scanned the environment. They had become paranoid, and perhaps with reason. It was on Wednesday that things began to fall apart. Arya was organizing Derek's schedule when his previous assistant, Marcy, appeared at the office door. A middle-aged woman, efficient, who had worked for the Cavendish family for more than 15 years before being transferred to another sector when Arya was hired. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" Marcy asked, looking nervously from side to side. "Of course," Arya replied, gesturing for her to sit. Marcy closed the door behind her and approached the desk, her voice low. "You need to be careful. There are people asking questions about you." Arya's blood chilled. "What kind of questions?" "About your past, your family, your medical history, and they're not just casual questions. It's a formal investigation." "Who's asking?" "People from the Human Resources Department. They say it's a routine security check, but—" Marcy hesitated. "I've worked here for 15 years. I've never seen such a detailed check." Arya felt as if the floor were moving beneath her feet. Dr. Martinez had fulfilled his threat. "What else do you know?" "I heard they're questioning your mental stability, that there are concerns about your suitability to work with confidential information." Marcy leaned forward. "Arya, they're building a case against you." "Why?" "I don't know. But I know it started after you and Mr. Cavendish stayed working late last week. Someone didn't like something you discovered." Marcy stood, up to leave, but stopped at the door. "One more thing. Be careful with Dr. Martinez. He's not who he seems to be." "What do you mean?" "He wasn't here when Mrs. Helen died. He was at a conference in Geneva. He only returned 3 days after the accident." The revelation hit Arya like lightning. "Doctor, Martinez had lied about his direct involvement with Helen in the last weeks of her life. After Marcy left, Aria sat alone in the office, processing the information. If Dr. Martinez wasn't present when Helen died, how could he know so many details about her mental state? How could he be sure that the accident was caused by the effects of the medication? When Derek returned from lunch, she immediately shared the discoveries. Martinez lied, he said, his voice tense. But why? Maybe because he's covering up something bigger. Derek went to the computer and began typing quickly. What are you doing? Checking his travel records. If he was in Geneva, there will be documentation. After a few minutes of searching through the company's files, Derek found what he was looking for. Here it is, Dr. Richard Martinez, Conference on Experimental Neurology in Geneva, from March 15 to 22. He looked at Aria. Helen died on the 18th, so he definitely wasn't here when she died. But look at this, Derek pointed to another line in the document. He cancelled his participation in the conference on the last day, returned to the US one day earlier than scheduled, on the 21st, 3 days after Helen's death. Why would he cancel an important international conference to return early? Aria studied the documents, a suspicion growing in her mind. What if he knew something was going to happen to Helen? What if he needed to be here to control the situation after her death? You're suggesting he orchestrated the accident? I'm suggesting that he knew Helen was taking the experimental medication, and maybe he sabotaged it somehow. Derek leaned back in his chair, processing the possibility. But how? Helen was testing the medication on herself in secret. Not so secretly, apparently. Martinez knew about it. They were interrupted by a knock at the door. Derek's secretary entered looking nervous. Mr. Cavendish, there are people from the legal department wanting to speak with Miss Johnson. Aria and Derek exchanged a quick glance. Tell them we're in a meeting, Derek replied. They said it's urgent, about security matters. How many people? 3, and there's a man I don't know. He's not an employee of the company. Dr. Martinez had escalated the situation. Aria stood up, a sudden determination taking over her. Tell them we'll be down. In 5 minutes, she said to the secretary. After the woman left, Derek turned to her. Aria, we don't need to face this now. We can leave through the service entrance. No, she replied, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. I'm not going to run anymore. If Martinez wants to play dirty, let's play. What do you have in mind? Aria walked to the cabinet where Derek kept Helen's documents. You said we needed a backup copy of everything we discovered. Yes, but what if we don't just make one copy? What if we make it all public? Derek looked at her with a mixture of admiration and concern. That would be very dangerous. More dangerous than letting Martinez destroy us in silence. Aria took out her phone and began quickly photographing the most important documents. What are you doing? Life insurance. If something happens to me, I want you to send all of this to an investigative journalist. Aria. And I want you to promise me one thing. What? She stopped photographing and looked at him directly. If I decide to take Helen's medication, you'll support me. You've decided? Not yet, but if I do decide, I need to know you'll be with me. Derek came closer to her, taking her hands. I'm with you in any decision you make, but please think carefully. The medication almost killed Helen. Helen didn't have the same genetics as me, and she was taking experimental doses without proper medical supervision. And how would you get proper medical supervision? We can't trust anyone here. Aria had thought about this. I know someone, a neurologist who took care of my mother years ago, Dr. August Rivers. He's ethical and discreet. You trust him? More than I trust anyone here. They finished photographing the documents and put everything back in place. When they went down to the ground floor, they found 4 people waiting in the reception, 3 employees from the company's legal department, and an older man Aria didn't recognize. Miss Johnson, one of the lawyers approached. I'm Dr. Frank Lewis from legal. We need to discuss some issues about your position in the company. What kind of issues? Security and professional suitability issues, if we could talk in private. Anything you have to say can be said. In front of Mr. Cavendish, Arya replied, noticing how her own voice sounded stronger and more confident than she felt. The unknown man approached. Miss Johnson, I'm Dr. Paul Andrews, psychiatrist. I understand that you have a history of psychotic episodes. The question was asked loudly in the crowded reception. Arya realized it was an intimidation tactic, a way to humiliate her publicly. My medical history is confidential, she responded, calmly. Not when it comes to workplace safety, Dr. Lewis intervened. We have concerns about your ability to handle sensitive information. Based on what? Based on reports of erratic and obsessive behavior in relation to Mr. Cavendish. The accusation was like a slap in the face. Arya could feel the eyes of all the employees present in the reception fixed on her. This is ridiculous, Derek intervened. Miss Johnson is an exemplary employee. Mr. Cavendish, we understand that your proximity to Miss Johnson may compromise your judgment, Dr. Lewis said, but we have evidence that she has demonstrated obsessive behavior dating back to years before meeting you personally. They knew about the photo. Dr. Martinez had told them about the newspaper photo she kept. And what evidence is that? Arya asked, deciding to face the situation head-on. Dr. Andrews opened a folder and took out a copy of the photo. This photo was found at your residence during an authorized search this morning. A search? Derek exploded. By what authority? Judicial authority. There's an ongoing criminal investigation into possible theft of company intellectual property. Arya felt as if the world were crumbling around her. They had invaded her house. They had found the photo. And now they were using this to build a case that she was an obsessive stalker. Where is my mother? She asked, her voice coming out higher than intended. Your mother is safe, Dr. Lewis replied. She was taken to a temporary institution while we resolve these issues. You can't do that. She needs me. Actually, we can, when there are concerns about the mental stability of the primary caregiver. Arya felt tears of anger burning her eyes. They had played dirty, using her mother as a bargaining chip. What do you want? She asked. We want you to resign from your position and sign a confidentiality agreement, Dr. Lewis said. In exchange, we won't proceed with criminal charges, and your mother will be returned to your care. And if I refuse? Then you'll be arrested for theft of intellectual property, and your mother will remain in state custody. Derek stepped forward, his voice dangerously low. You're blackmailing an innocent employee. We're protecting the company's interests, Dr. Lewis replied, and we suggest that you be careful. Your own position may be at risk if you continue to associate with destabilizing elements. The threat was clear. If Derek tried to protect Arya, he too would be destroyed. Arya looked around the reception, seeing the curious faces of the employees, feeling the weight of public humiliation. But then something changed inside her. Instead of shame, she felt anger, a pure clarifying anger. I will not resign, she said, her voice firm, and I won't sign any agreement. Miss Johnson, you want to accuse me of theft? Then do it. But you'll have to prove that I stole something, and good luck with that. Dr. Andrews leaned forward. Miss Johnson, considering your history of mental instability, it would be better to accept our offer. My history of mental instability was when I was a teenager, more than 10 years ago, and even then I was never considered dangerous or criminal. Arya turned to Dr. Lewis. Where exactly do you think I stole intellectual property? All the information I accessed was through my legitimate work as Mr. Cavendish's assistant. Information about classified projects that were beyond the scope of your duties. Projects that my supervisor gave me direct access to. If there's something inappropriate about that, the fault is with the supervision process, not mine. Arya was gaining confidence as she spoke. Years of being invisible had taught her to observe, to understand how people worked, and she could see that the lawyers weren't as confident as they were trying to appear. Furthermore, she continued, I'd like to know how you obtained judicial authorization for a search of my residence based only on unfounded allegations of obsessive behavior. Dr. Lewis hesitated for a moment before answering. There is evidence that you have unauthorized access to confidential information. What evidence? I want to see the documentation. That's part of an ongoing investigation. Then, until you can present real evidence, there's no legal basis for any of these actions. Arya turned to Dr. Andrews. And doctor, I'd like to see your credentials and the medical basis for your assessment of my mental stability, since you've never examined me personally. The psychiatrist became clearly uncomfortable. I based my assessment on previous medical records and behavior reports. Confidential medical records that you shouldn't have access to without my written authorization. And behavior reports from whom? Silence. Arya realized she had found a flaw in their plan. They had been careless, relying too much on the power of intimidation. Gentlemen, she said, her voice now carrying an authority she didn't know she possessed, if you have legitimate evidence of irregularities, then follow the appropriate legal procedures. Until then, I'll return to my work. She turned to leave, but Dr. Lewis grabbed her by the arm. Miss Johnson, you're making a mistake. Derek immediately positioned himself between them. Take your hand off her. Mr. Cavendish, take your hand off her. The tension in the air was palpable. For a moment, it seemed there would be a physical confrontation. But then Dr. Lewis released Arya's arm. This isn't over, he said. No, Arya agreed, it isn't over. When they got back to the office, Derek immediately called his personal lawyer. While he spoke on the phone, Arya sat down and tried to process what had just happened. She had faced the intimidation attempt and hadn't yielded, but the price would be high. They had her mother, and they would use that against her. My lawyer is checking the legality of the search of your house, Derek said when he finished the call, and he's going to find out where they're keeping your mother. Thank you. Arya, you were amazing down there. I don't know where you got that strength. I think I got tired of being invisible, she replied. I got tired of letting other people decide who I am. Derek sat beside her. What do you want to do now? Arya thought for a moment, feeling a clarity she hadn't had in days. I want 3 things. First, I want my mother back. Second, I want to discover the complete truth about Helen's death. And third, I want to take the medication. Arya, not to prevent Alzheimer's. I mean, that would be a good consequence if it worked. But that's not why I want to take it. Then why? Because it's my choice. Throughout my life, other people have made decisions for me. My doctors, my bosses, and now even Helen tried to control my life after death. But this decision is mine. Derek studied her carefully. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. And if it goes wrong? What if the medication harms you? Then at least I'll have been the one who decided. And if it goes right, I'll have taken the first step to taking control of my own life. They spent the rest of the afternoon planning. Derek would contact Dr. August Rivers, the neurologist Arya had mentioned. They would need a safe place to administer the medication, away from Dr. Martinez's eyes and his allies, and they would need a plan to recover Arya's mother. At 6 in the evening, when most employees had left, they went down again to Helen's personal laboratory. This time, Arya knew exactly what she was looking for. In the special freezer behind dozens of samples, she found 3 small vials with handwritten labels. RK-47, dose AJ. Helen prepared specific doses for you, Derek observed. 3 doses, probably a complete treatment cycle. Arya took the vials and carefully stored them in a thermal bag she found in the laboratory. There's no going back after this, Derek said. I know. When they left the laboratory, Arya felt as if she were carrying more than just medications. She was carrying her own agency, her own choice, her own silent revolution against all who tried to control her. In the parking lot, they were approached by a man whom Arya recognized as the night doorman of the building where she had worked as a cleaner. Miss Arya, he said, looking nervous. I need to talk to you. Hi, Joe, what happened? It's about that night, a few months ago, the night of the storm when you went up to the gentleman's apartment. Arya and Derek exchanged a look. What about that night? I lied when the security guards asked. I said I hadn't seen anything strange. And what did you see? Joe looked nervously around before answering. I saw a man leaving the building shortly after you went up, a man who wasn't a resident. Did you recognize him? At the time, no, but I saw his photo in the newspaper today. It was that doctor, who was appointed to an important position in the company. Arya felt her blood freeze. Dr. Martinez. That's the one. He was there that night, miss, and he seemed in a hurry to leave without being seen. The revelation changed everything. Dr. Martinez not only knew about the connection between Arya and Derek, he had been present on the night they met. He had orchestrated their meeting. Joe, why are you telling me this now? Because I heard you're having problems at work, and because, he hesitated, because I think that man is dangerous. There are rumors that he's been involved in bad things. What kind of things? Illegal tests on poor patients, medications that made people sick, things that were hushed up. After Joe left, Arya and Derek sat in the car in silence, processing the information. Martinez was there the night we met, Derek finally said. He knew that Helen had planned our meeting, and he wanted to make sure it would happen. But why? If he was against Helen's research, why would he facilitate her plan? Arya thought for a moment, a terrible suspicion growing in her mind. What if he wasn't against the research? What if he wanted to control the research? What do you mean? Helen discovered something about Martinez's other projects. Bad things, illegal things. She was blackmailing him so she could continue with RK-47. And he decided to get rid of her but continue the research using you as a guinea pig. Not just as a guinea pig. As a guinea pig he could control. He probably thought it would be easy to manipulate me. Derek hit his fist on the steering wheel. Son of a bitch, he killed Helen and tried to use us to continue her work. But he underestimated one thing. What? Arya smiled, and there was something fierce in that smile. He underestimated the fact that invisible women can become very dangerous when they decide to be seen. That night, Arya made two decisions that would change everything. First, she would take Helen's medication, but on her own terms. Second, she and Derek wouldn't run from Dr. Martinez. They would destroy him. When she got home, she found signs of the search everywhere. Drawers opened, furniture overturned, papers scattered, but what disturbed her most was her mother's absence. The house was too silent, too empty. Arya sat on the bed and called Dr. August Rivers. When he answered, she got straight to the point. Doctor, it's Arya Johnson. I need your help with something delicate. Of course, Arya. What can I do? I need you to examine me and evaluate my capacity to take an experimental medication. There was a pause on the other end of the line. What kind of medication? One that can prevent Alzheimer's, but that can also kill me. Arya, Doctor, I know it sounds crazy, but I need someone I trust to help me do this in the safest way possible. After a long conversation, Dr. Rivers agreed to see her the next day, but he made one condition. He wanted to examine the medication completely and understand all the risks before authorizing anything. If I think it's suicide, he said, I won't help. I understand, but if you think it's a calculated risk worth taking, then we'll do it the right way. After the call, Arya was alone in her empty house holding the medication vials. In her hands was the future Helen had planned for her. But now, for the first time, she would be the one to decide how that future would unfold. No longer the invisible woman who cleaned mirrors without seeing herself in them. No longer the patient who let others decide her treatment. No longer the victim who allowed powerful men to control her life. Tomorrow she would start fighting back, and Dr. Martinez would discover that he had completely underestimated who Arya Johnson was. The next morning, Arya woke up with the feeling that she was about to cross a portal of no return. The sun entered through the window of the empty room, illuminating the traces of the search they had done in her house. Each object out of place was a reminder that her private life had been violated, that powerful men thought they could invade and reorganize her existence at will. But today would be different. Today she would take back control. Derek arrived at 7 in the morning, bringing coffee and a tense expression that she had learned to recognize. He carried news, and from the weight of his shoulders, they weren't good. My lawyer found out. "Where they're keeping your mother," he said, sitting at the kitchen table. "Serene Valley Care Home in Oakdale. But Aria..." "But what?" "They registered her as a patient in critical mental state. They said she was being neglected at home and that she represents a danger to herself." The anger Aria felt was so intense that for a moment she couldn't speak. Using her mother's disease as a weapon against her was a cruelty that went beyond anything she could have imagined. "Can I visit her?" "Technically, yes, but only with supervision and only after a psychological evaluation of you." "A psychological evaluation done by whom?" "By a professional appointed by the state, who, coincidentally, will be Dr. Paul Andrews." Aria hit the table with enough force to make the glasses jump. "They thought of everything, didn't they?" "Martinez is meticulous," Derek agreed, "but also arrogant, and arrogant people make mistakes." "What kind of mistakes?" Derek took a folder out of the bag he had brought. "I spent the night investigating Dr. Paul Andrews. He's not just a random psychiatrist. He has financial ties to Cavendish laboratories for years, consultancies, research, paid opinions. A psychiatrist for hire." "Exactly. And there's more. Andrews was responsible for reports that compulsorily committed 3 people in the last 2 years. All had one thing in common." "What?" "All had made complaints against pharmaceutical companies for illegal tests." The revelation was disturbing, but not surprising. Dr. Martinez had built a network of complicity that allowed him to silence any opposition. "And Dr. August Rivers, were you able to confirm the meeting?" "Yes. He'll wait for us at 2 in the afternoon at his private clinic. But Aria, he made a point of making it clear that if there's any sign that the medication could harm you, he won't allow you to take it." "I understand. And I respect that." They spent the morning gathering all the documents about RK-47 that they had found. Aria wanted Dr. Rivers to have access to all available information before making a decision. This wasn't about a desperate impulse, but an informed and calculated choice. At 11 in the morning, they received an unexpected visit. Marcy, Derek's former assistant, appeared at Aria's door looking nervous and constantly looking over her shoulder. "Can I come in?" "It's important." Aria led her inside, offering coffee. Marcy refused, her hands trembling slightly. "I shouldn't be here," she began, "but there are things you need to know." "About what?" "About Helen, and about what really happened on the night she died." Derek leaned forward, his complete attention focused on Marcy. "What do you know?" "I was working late that night. Helen came to the office at 11 o'clock, completely agitated. She said she had discovered something terrible about Dr. Martinez." "What kind of discovery?" Marcy took a deep breath before continuing. "Helen found evidence that Martinez was selling patient data to foreign companies, genetic information, medical histories, experimental test results, everything that could be used to develop targeted medications." "That's illegal," Aria said. "More than illegal. It's monstrous." Helen discovered that data from more than 10,000 American patients had been sold without consent, including information about children with rare diseases. Derek clenched his fists. Did she confront Martinez about this? She said she was going to confront him, but first she wanted to ensure she had enough evidence to completely destroy him. And did she? She did. Helen showed me files, emails, bank transfer records, everything meticulously documented. Aria felt a pang of recognition. Helen was always that careful. She always documented everything. "She gave me a backup copy of the files," Marcy continued. "Said that if something happened to her, I should give it to Derek." "Where are these files now?" Marcy took a USB drive from her pocket. "Here. Everything is here." Derek took the USB drive with reverence, as if he were holding a weapon. "Why? Did you take so long to give us this?" "Because I was afraid. After Helen died, Martinez approached me, said he knew she had given me something, and that it would be better for me if I handed it over. When I said I didn't know anything, he threatened me." "How?" "Said I could suffer an accident like Helen. Said that accidents happen to people." Who meddled where they weren't called? Arya stood up and began walking around the room, her mind quickly processing the information. So Helen didn't die because of the experimental medication. She died because she discovered Martinez's scheme. Not necessarily, Derek intervened. It could have been a combination. Maybe Martinez sabotaged the medication she was taking, increased the dosage or altered the formula somehow. How could he do that? Helen trusted him. If he offered to review the medication to ensure it was safe, she would probably allow. Marcy nodded. Actually, she mentioned that Martinez had offered to analyze RK-47, said he was being useful for the first time in months. The picture was forming. Dr. Martinez had discovered that Helen was investigating his crimes. Instead of simply killing her, he had found a smarter way, sabotaged the medication she was testing on herself, making it appear that death was the result of her own scientific recklessness. There's something else, Marcy said. Helen mentioned that she had discovered something about you, Arya. Something beyond the genetic predisposition to Alzheimer's. What else? She said your genetics were special in other ways, that you had rare markers that could be useful for other types of research. A chill ran down Arya's spine. What types of research? I don't know. But she was worried that Martinez would discover about these markers, said he would do anything to gain access to them. After Marcy left, Arya and Derek sat in silence, assimilating all the revelations. The USB drive was on the table between them like an undetonated bomb. We need to see what's on this USB drive, Derek said finally. After the consultation with Dr. Rivers, first I want to resolve the medication issue. Arya, considering what we just discovered, maybe we should reconsider taking RK-47. If Martinez sabotaged the medication, the doses we found in Helen's laboratory are prior to the sabotage, she interrupted him. Helen prepared them before. Martinez offered to help. They should be pure. How can you be sure? Because Helen marked the dates on each vial. The doses were prepared weeks before her death, long before Martinez got involved. Derek studied her carefully. You really want to do this? More than ever. Now that I know Martinez wants my genetics for his own purposes, I want to ensure that it's used only for what I decide. At 2 in the afternoon, they were at Dr. August Rivers's private clinic. It was a discreet, elegant place, but not ostentatious. Dr. Rivers received them personally, a 60-year-old man with grey hair and kind eyes that immediately inspired confidence. Arya, you've grown so much, he said, hugging her warmly. I remember when you were 17 and going through that difficult phase. Thank you for agreeing to see us, Doctor. Of course. Now tell me exactly what this experimental medication is about. For the next hour, Arya and Derek explained the whole situation. Dr. Rivers asked detailed questions, analyzed Helen's documents, examined the medication vials. His expression became increasingly serious as he understood the complexity of the situation. This medication is truly revolutionary, he said finally. If it works as Helen designed, it can prevent not just Alzheimer's, but an entire category of neurodegenerative diseases. But there are risks, Arya said. Significant risks. The medication alters genetic expression at the cellular level. If something goes wrong, the damage can be irreversible. What kinds of damage? Accelerated. Neurological deterioration, loss of cognitive function, in extreme cases death. Dr. Rivers leaned back in his chair, studying Arya's face. Why do you want to risk this? Because I don't want to spend the rest of my life wondering what if. Because I want to take control of my own destiny. And because... She hesitated. Because if I don't do this, powerful men will use my genetics for purposes I can't even imagine. And you understand that even if the medication works, there are no guarantees about its long-term effects. I understand. But doctor, all life is experimental. Every choice is a risk. At least this time, the risk is mine. Dr. Rivers smiled, and there was approval in his eyes. You were always determined, Arya, even when you were a teenager and fighting against your own mind. So you'll help me? I will, but with conditions. First, we'll do a complete medical exam to ensure you're in condition to try this. Second, we'll start with a reduced dose to test your reaction. Third, You'll be under medical observation throughout the entire process. How long will it take? If everything goes well, the complete treatment will take 2 weeks. If there are complications—" He paused. "Well, we'll deal with that when it happens." During the next 2 hours, Dr. Rivers conducted a battery of tests: blood, urine, neurological reflexes, cognitive tests. When he finished, he declared that Arya was in excellent physical and mental condition to try the treatment. "When do you want to start?" he asked. "Now." Dr. Rivers prepared the first dose, a fraction of the amount Helen had specified. It was a clear, odorless liquid that seemed too harmless to carry so much potential for change. "One last chance to change your mind," he said, holding the syringe. Arya looked at Derek, who nodded encouragingly. "I'm ready." The injection was quick and almost painless. For a few minutes, Arya felt nothing different. Then gradually she began to notice subtle changes. Colors seemed more vivid, sounds clearer, as if some filter had been removed from her senses. "How do you feel?" Dr. Rivers asked. "Different, more present. Any pain, dizziness, nausea?" "No, just awake, as if I had been partially asleep my whole life and now I'm fully waking up." Dr. Rivers monitored her vital signs for 2 hours. Everything remained normal. The first dose had been a success. "Come back tomorrow for the second dose," he said. "And Arya, be careful in the next 24 hours. We don't know how the medication may affect your perception or judgment." When they left the clinic, Arya felt strangely energized. The world seemed sharper, more real. She could perceive details that would normally go unnoticed: the exact texture of the concrete under her feet, the way light filtered through the leaves of the trees, the micro-expressions on Derek's face. "How are you really feeling?" he asked when they got in the car. "Like I've gained subtle superpowers," she replied, laughing. "Or like I've been wearing foggy glasses my whole life, and finally got glasses with the right prescription." "You're different," Derek observed. "More intense." Arya turned to look at him, really look at him. She could see every golden thread in his green eyes, every line of concern around them. And more than that, she could feel the depth of his concern for her, like a physical emanation. "Derek?" "Yes?" "I love you." The words came out without planning, honest and direct. It was the first time either of them had said this explicitly. Derek pulled over to the side of the road and turned to her. "I love you too, since that first night, when you walked into my office as if you belonged there. Even knowing that Helen orchestrated our meeting, especially knowing that. Because what I feel for you can't be fabricated or manipulated. It's too real, too big." They kissed there in the front seat of the car, and Arya felt as if every cell in her body was vibrating at a higher frequency. The medication had intensified, not just her senses but her emotions. When they separated, Derek held her face between his hands. "Whatever happens with Martinez, with the medication, with all of this, I want you to know that this moment is real." "We are real." "I know," Arya replied, "and that's why I'm going to fight to protect this." They returned to Arya's house to analyze the contents of the USB drive that Marcy had delivered. What they found was devastating. Helen had meticulously documented Dr. Martinez's scheme: contracts with foreign pharmaceutical companies, records of bank transfers, emails detailing the sale of genetic information from American patients. Everything was there, organized and categorized with Helen's characteristic scientific precision. This would completely destroy Martinez, Derek said, analyzing a particularly incriminating email, and would save hundreds of patients who don't even know their data was sold. "What do you want to do with this information?" Arya thought for a moment, feeling the mental clarity the medication had provided. "I want to use it as leverage to recover my mother, and then I want to make it all public. That will create a huge scandal." "Good. Martinez deserves more than a scandal." They spent the rest of the afternoon planning their strategy. First, they would confront Dr. Martinez with the evidence and demand the immediate release of Arya's mother. Second, they would ensure she could continue the treatment without interference. Third, they would make public all the information about the data-selling scheme. At 6 in the evening, Derek called Dr. Martinez. "We need to talk," he said without preambles. "Tonight." "About what?" About Helen, about patient data sold illegally, and about what you really did on the night my wife died. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Where do you want to meet? At the laboratory, 9 o'clock, and doctor, come alone. After hanging up, Derek turned to Arya. He'll try something. Men like Martinez don't surrender easily. No, but we're not running from him anymore. Are you sure you want to do this today with the medication in your system? Arya felt an iron determination grow within her. Especially with the medication in my system. I've never felt clearer or stronger. At 8:30 at night, they arrived at the laboratory. The building was almost empty, just a few security guards and researchers working on urgent projects. Dr. Martinez was waiting for them in his office. But he wasn't alone. Dr. Paul Andrews was sitting in one of the chairs, along with two men Arya didn't recognize. Big men, who looked more like security guards than scientists. Miss Johnson, Dr. Martinez stood up when they entered. What a pleasure to see you again. I heard you made a very imprudent decision today. How do you know about the medication? I have people observing you for weeks. Dr. Rivers was imprudent to agree to treat a patient with a history of mental instability. Dr. Andrews leaned forward. Actually, Miss Johnson, I took the liberty of preparing a compulsory commitment order, considering your altered mental state and the risk you represent to yourself. You can't do this, Derek intervened. We can and we will, Dr. Martinez replied calmly. Unless you're reasonable. What do you want? We want Miss Johnson to voluntarily submit to medical tests supervised by our team. We want complete access to the effects of the medication in her system, and we want you two to forget anything. You think you've discovered about my commercial activities? Arya laughed, a humorless sound. You want to use my body as a laboratory to study Helen's medication. The medication that can revolutionize the treatment of neurological diseases. Yes, and you should feel honored to contribute to the advancement of science. The science that you prostitute by selling patient data to foreign companies. The mask of civility slipped from Dr. Martinez's face for a moment. You don't know what you're talking about. Derek took a printed copy of Helen's emails from the folder he was carrying. We know exactly what we're talking about. We have everything documented, Martinez. Each transaction, each contract, each patient whose data you sold. Dr. Martinez looked at the papers, his expression hardening. Where did you get this? Helen was smarter than you thought, Arya said. She knew you would kill her if you discovered what she knew, so she made sure other people had access to the evidence. Helen died because of her own scientific recklessness. Helen died because you sabotaged the medication she was taking. Dr. Martinez smiled, but it was a cold and dangerous smile. Prove it. We don't need to prove it, Arya replied. We have enough evidence about your other crimes. Helen's murder is just the cherry on top. Dr. Andrews stood up abruptly. Miss Johnson, you're clearly delusional. The experimental medication has affected your ability to distinguish reality from fantasy. Actually, Doctor, the medication did exactly the opposite. It gave me clarity to see you for what you really are. Arya addressed Dr. Martinez directly. I want my mother back, now. And I want you to stop all this persecution. And in exchange? In exchange, I'll give you 48 hours to leave the country before making public all the evidence we have. You're bluffing. Arya took out her phone and showed she had sent a message. I just sent a copy of all the files to 3 different investigative journalists. If anything happens to me or Derek, they'll receive instructions to publish everything. Dr. Martinez was visibly disturbed. You don't know who you're messing with, girl. I know exactly who I'm messing with. A small cowardly man who kills women and exploits vulnerable patients. The tension in the office was palpable. The 2 security guards had stood up and were strategically positioning themselves. Arya realized the situation was about to escalate to violence. But then Dr. Martinez did something unexpected. He smiled. Very well, Miss Johnson, you want to play this game? Let's play, but remember that you chose the rules. He went to the phone on his desk. Release patient Connie Johnson from Serene Valley Care Home immediately. After hanging up, he turned to them. Your mother will be released within an hour. Consider this a gesture of goodwill. And the persecution? It will stop. For now. Arya didn't like the tone of implied threat, but she had gotten what she wanted, her mother back. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Dr. Martinez said. This game is far from over. When they left the laboratory, Derek was visibly tense. That was too easy, he said. Martinez is planning something. I know, but we got what we wanted for now. And now? Arya looked at the night sky of New York, feeling the energy of the medication running through her veins. Now we're going to get my mother. And then we're going to disappear for a few days. Disappear? I need to finish the treatment without interference, and I need time to process everything that's happening to me. Where do you want to go? Arya thought of the abandoned country house she had mentioned to Dr. Rivers, the place where she used to hide as a child. I know a place where no one will find us. An hour later, they were at Serene Valley Care Home, hugging Connie. Arya's mother seemed confused but not traumatized by the experience. Where were we, dear? She asked when they got in the car. In a temporary place, Mom, but now we're going home. That's good. I didn't like that place. The people weren't kind. During the journey back, Arya made a decision. They wouldn't return to her house in Maplewood. It was time to disappear for a while, as she had told Derek, but first she wanted to do one thing. Derek, can you stop at a pharmacy? Why? I want to buy a pregnancy test. What? It's just a precaution. The medication can affect hormones, and I want to make sure there are no complications. At the pharmacy, while Derek bought the test, Arya was thinking about everything that had changed in her life in the last few weeks, from invisible cleaner to protagonist of an international conspiracy, from lonely woman to someone deeply loved, from victim to warrior. The medication had awakened something in her, but Arya knew that the strength she felt didn't just come from the chemical compounds running through her blood. It came from the conscious choice to no longer accept being manipulated or controlled. When they returned to the car, she had made a final decision. Derek, after I finish the treatment, I want us to do something together. What? I want us to expose everything about Martinez publicly, not just his crimes, but all the corruption in the system. I want the families of the patients whose data was sold to know the truth. That will be dangerous. Everything worth doing is dangerous. Derek smiled, and there was pride in his eyes. When you decide to disappear, take me with you. Not decide, we'll decide. And yes, if you want to come, it would be the best thing that could happen. That night, they drove toward upstate New York, heading to the country house where Arya had spent part of her childhood. It was an isolated place, away from security cameras and curious eyes, a place where she could complete her transformation in peace. As the city was left behind, Arya felt as if she were leaving behind not just a location, but an old version of herself. The woman who would return from her hiding place would be someone completely different, someone Dr. Martinez would discover he had completely underestimated. The game had begun, but the rules had changed, and for the first time in her life, Arya Johnson was playing to win. The country house was 2 hours from New York, hidden among hills covered with forest in the lakeside region. It was a simple property that had belonged to Arya's grandparents, a refuge where her family used to spend vacations when she was a child, before life became too complex for simple moments of happiness. They arrived in the middle of the night, under a starry sky that seemed impossible to exist so close to the metropolis. The house was exactly as Arya remembered: exposed brick walls, red ceramic roof, a wide porch with a view of a small lake. Time had left its marks: peeling paint, some loose tiles, weeds grown around, but the structure remained solid. "It's perfect," Derek said, helping Connie out of the car. Arya's mother looked around with childlike curiosity, as if she were discovering a magical place. "I remember this place," Connie said, surprising her daughter. In recent months, old memories rarely emerged with clarity. "We used to come here when you were little. You fished in that lake." Arya felt a wave of emotion. The medication had intensified not just her perception, but also her capacity to feel. Each moment seemed loaded with meaning. "That's right, Mum,"